Hello, everyone. My name is Josh, and this is the team's recap. Yes, we did take an extensive break over the holidays, trying to regroup and regather thoughts, but back here, and we're doing things a bit different today. First up, I've got a bit of a frog or seven in my throat, so please, if I choke on it or have a little bit of a cough, please forgive me. But we're going to do things a little different as we go through our content today. For starters, I pretty much have never had a guest on the show, with the brief exceptions at Ignite, where I've had Matt Landis as my guest in the past, fellow MVP on the Office Servers and Services side. And today, actually, on a regular Teams non-Ignite episode, we've got Matt Landis with us again to talk about a number of topics. So, Matt, welcome to the show. Go ahead and please introduce yourself for a moment, and yeah, we'll jump into content after that.
Yeah, well, glad to be on in spite of having a snowy January day outside. It's good to be on here in inside, nice cozy office. No need to, we can do this remote. We don't need to travel. We can do it. So yeah, glad to be on. Yeah. Glad to talk about the new things that are happening with Microsoft Teams, and yeah, glad to be here.
And with you guys, as it were, as well. So. But yeah, I feel bad for you on the snow front. It is colder than I like it to be. I'm wearing a jacket in my office as a result, but I feel wimpy saying that, as it's probably hovering around 50 degrees outside right now. So not too bad down here.
Amazingly, with our snow, it's probably high 20s, so it's not as cold as it could be. Snow actually usually raises it a little, but yeah, it's a wintry day.
Well, and this cold front is catching up to us today as well. Yesterday, the high was 70, and today it's going to start diving mid-afternoon, and we'll get down to about 28 degrees right around, middle of the night. So it's going to be frigid for us. Let's just say all these little tropical plants are pretty much going to be dead tomorrow is how it will go. But
you're at the right place. You're at the right place.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Let me jump into. We've got a number of topics that we want to cover today, and one thing I do want to call out as I get ready to share my desktop here. I'm going to share my main monitor, and we will switch over to our browser here. All right, so that should be coming up in the content in a second here. One thing I want to mention is that the format of how I'm recording is a bit different today. Normally when I'm recording solo, I use a product called XSplit, and it does the job well, but it does not provide a very good mechanism for having a guest on the show and switching back and forth with videos and also doing content, particularly in the Skype for Business realm. And so our good friends over at Pexip, I want to thank Graham Walsh and the team over there for hooking us up with Pexip platform for today, and perhaps maybe a few more episodes down the road, which did involve guests. Great product. A few, I don't know, maybe a year better ago, I had Graham on a separate little series that I had attempted to start called the Skype for B Spotlight. And we went over Pexip at that time, and we used their platform at that time as well. It did great. It recorded at high quality. It was a very good experience, and they have been kind enough to bring this show to all of you today by letting us record on their platform. So a very big thank you to Pexip. In the YouTube details description on the YouTube video, I will go ahead and include a link to Pexip software here, so that you can come and check out what they've got if you were impressed by how the show went today. So, have you had any experiences personally with Pexip outside of today, Matt?
Yeah, I do not have an account myself, but I've been on some other podcasts where we used it, and they're doing some interesting. I want to get an account, so I need to talk to Pexip myself, but. The neat things that they're doing is making it that you can bring multiple different systems into one meeting, and also, unlike Skype for Business, show those in a big panel side by side. So, and I'm sure they're doing more. Those are the things that kind of I'm aware of from my perspective, but they're doing some interesting things.
Now they've got a great video interop platform, and then there's also a lot of Skype for Business certification going on here, both within on-prem and the cloud in Office 365. So great for Skype for Business users like us, and then users on other platforms as well. They're a good interop solution. So we will, again, I'll include this on the video description for the audience, and you guys can check them out at your leisure. Big, huge thank you to Pexip for today. All right, let's move on past that. We are taking a look here at a bit of a relic in our world. Now, this is not news from the last week. This is earlier in the month, but again, I've taken a bit of a break, so we're just getting around to it now. It is what it is. But OCS 2007, sunsetted, I should say. And that there's not a whole lot to say on this front, unless you want to offer any parting words, Matt. But
it's high.
Yeah,
it's high time to see it go. I think, are you seeing a lot of people still that have it? I think people have moved on. There's probably some holdouts
many years,
somewhere.
Actually.
Yeah. And interestingly, I got into the Microsoft UC world after OCS. So the link days is where I really started saying, wait a minute, this can be a solution. But I think maybe you went back further than that.
Yeah, I had a bit of a weird background in this. I started in OCS 2007 R2, and that was kind of just I was in a small company. We had a single Exchange server. We had Active Directory. We had a SharePoint farm that was pretty new. And they said, hey, this OCS thing looks pretty cool, this whole unified messaging concept. Go figure that out and install it for us. And so that was my intro. I fumbled my way through that and got it up and running, replacing Yahoo as our internal IM solution with OCS 2007 R2. And once I got that deployed, however, I left the company and didn't get back into the game until about Link 2013. And since then, I have not seen a system older than Link 2010. So, if there are still users out there using it, and I'm guessing there are at least a couple, support is gone at this stage, so it is definitely time to move on a little bit. But, end of life. So, all right, OCS, adios. We'll hopefully just not see you on any more deployments moving forward for the sake of everybody not having to deal with unsupported scenarios. Yep. All right. Next up, these next couple tabs up here are actually, pretty quick, just client updates. First one, the Skype for Business 2016 MSI client got an update on January 2nd. Just a few fixes that are called out here. First, I want to thank Guy Bakar. He always does a great job at breaking down each of these updates, including all the necessary links and telling us right up at the top exactly what's fixed and whether or not this is something we want to think about or care about at the moment. So first off, when we look up here, we have a problem with RDP, always used for screen sharing in a VDI v2 environment in Skype for Business 2016. Fix for that. Can't give control of a sharing session to the original user after adding a new user in Skype for Business. That sounds quite problematic. And then Skype meetings, not found when joining meetings. So yeah, a few key fixes there. Not a big laundry list, but the problems do sound fairly annoying if you're dealing with any of those. So if you are, and this is the client that you're using, here are all the links you would need to go get fixed up. And again, we'll include the link to this on the video description in YouTube. Jumping over to Guy's other post, we have pretty much the same stuff here for Skype for Business 2015, which would have been your Link 2013 before it was updated. And we only see the one fix listed there, the Skype meetings not found when joining meetings problem. So not a ton to talk about on this front, but oftentimes people are just not tuned in to when clients get an update. And if you've been struggling with problems, it's good to know when it's time to update. So there's that.
And in spite of us being really focused on Microsoft Teams and obviously a ton of development going on there, Skype for Business is not being ignored. Updates are coming out there. Obviously, Skype for Business Server 2019. Am I saying that year right? Or we get it tangled? I think 2019.
Yeah, 2019. Yeah.
So it'll be late 2018, early 2019, coming down the pike at us. So.
Yeah, and I mean It does. It can be at times very easy to get lost in the noise of Teams and Office 365 and phone system and all that's happening there. And it can be quite easy to forget if you're not, in the day-to-day mix of working with clients who are still on, a very on-prem platform. It can be easy to forget about some of the Skype side of things, but Microsoft is certainly not forgetting about it. They're keeping up with updating things on their side. So.
Yep.
But jumping out of the Skype world and into that Teams world where all the noise is, let's go to this next tab here. Now, you were on Pat Richards' recent on the podcast recently, his new UC Inside Track show, a podcast, and you guys talked a lot about about all the new developments within Teams. And so I hate to drag you back through all that again, but we're going to touch on that briefly.
No, go ahead. Zero in on things that are interesting to you. I'm glad to talk about it. That's perfectly fine.
I know you're always up for talking Teams and what's new there. So this post that we're looking at is from another fellow MVP, Tom Morgan, over at Modality Systems. He did a great blog right at the end of the year, December 29th, calling out all the new features that were released for Teams. Now, Microsoft had targeted a large number of items on its roadmap for the end of Q4 2017. It was quite an aggressive list, and I think there was some skepticism about whether or not most of that would actually be delivered. And I was quite impressed to see that almost everything on that Q4 roadmap was delivered on time. There were a few items that we'll get to at the bottom of this post that were postponed for Q1 of this year, but they really delivered a lot going into the new year. So, in the middle of a busy holiday season, kudos to the product group there. So
yeah, someone is putting in some long hours and getting some things done.
Yes.
You said little skepticism on time, the time schedule, but someone's obviously making some things happen, and it's great. So.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about the Teams as a product and the group that's working on that. I think they have been working hard to break the mold of what some have really started to adopt a train of thought about what they can expect from Microsoft on going over deadlines, or just a lot of things that have become kind of commonplace in their eyes for different Microsoft deliveries and timelines. Teams is a different beast in the way that it is delivered, period.
Yeah. But
the team behind Teams is really working hard to break that mold and to break that perception and deliver on targets. And I'm impressed so far. So.
Yeah, and obviously, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but we're changing models. We're no longer, Skype for Business server code that needs to get out there, and then administrators, install it. It's really this, software as a service. So that changes the dynamic a little bit, but also clearly Microsoft Teams has a huge amount of resources available to it to make things happen. So that is where the momentum is. That's where the investments are. So that's another.
It's a very, very agile development process, and it's it works well. I mean, there are things that come along with that as well that can be challenges, but I think all in all it allows for a lot of freedom, and it's good to see that.
And you do bring up a point that you do see a little bit more. So, because software as a service, it's a little more dynamic, and, a feature or maybe something can flip on you. Suddenly something moves on you. And so that's part of that agile things moving. Yeah. But it means things are happening as well. So the inverse of things happening is that things are changing. So, yeah.
Yes. It is, and I think it's changed in a good direction here. So, let's dive into some of these features here, and we won't dive too deeply into them. I remember that when we were talking the other day and prepping for the show, you had called out a certain feature that there was a behavior we wanted to make note of. If you remember what that is, I don't. So make sure to stop me when we get there.
Yeah, not a problem. I was already gonna jump on it. So I'll let you go, and I'll call it out when we get there.
Awesome. All right. So first off, Edge and Chrome browser support for meetings. So that's a pretty cool deal there. Without a plugin is really the big deal for viewing screen sharing. Plugins have been a thorn in many people's sides with the meeting experience over the years, and moving toward this plugin-less model is huge. So we're glad to see some of those steps.
Teams is moving there fast, so it's really neat.
Yes.
And sometimes I get confused what's out in the wild and what's behind the scenes, but they're obviously moving, getting that plugin-less experience, and not only, it's coming, and that's really, really good to see.
It is. I mean, that when you're talking to customers as a consultant, that is a typical that process, and how to smooth that out or get around it has been a big pain point and an unpleasant conversation for quite a while. And it's getting better.
And even for the meetings experience, people joining, we do meetings all day long, and how many times you're trying, the plugin's getting blocked, or, just let people dive into a meeting and it just folds out and works. So
yes. less time getting into the meeting and more time actually meeting,
Yes. Yeah.
Application sharing, another big deal there. Talking about, desktop sharing as well as presenting applications that are on your desktop, PowerPoints, things like that. I didn't get into and play with it in depth, so I don't recall how much application sharing is actually GA at this point. But if it's not all there yet, it is coming up on the roadmap in the future, but there was some features released there.
And that is the point that I wanted to talk about just slightly. So the give and take control of a screen share or a desktop share is enhanced beyond what we had in Skype for Business. So I always love when I see something that's better. Obviously group chat is like massively better, but now here we're seeing another one where they subtly and very, very, very nicely improve the experience when you're giving and taking control. So in Skype for Business, you give control to someone else, and then you're waving your mouse around. So in other words, you have your desktop, and you're giving it control to someone else, and then they're controlling. And inevitably, you're waving your mouse around, pointing at things or doing something, and what's the other person seeing? Nothing. You kind of have this feeling that they should see it. And that's exactly what they have done in Microsoft Teams. They make it so that the person that's sharing their desktop and the other person that's controlling, both of the mouses, you can see both of their mouse. Both of their what's the right plural? I'm not getting it right, but anyhow, both of the mice. Both of the mice. So you can So it's nice. You can point at things and you can say, oh, no, click over here. You know how it is when you're watching someone else, you always know where they should click, and the one that's running the mouse always can't find the thing they need to click on. Well, it really makes a nice experience to have both of those mice. Both of you have pointers. But there's another piece that they have done, which is clever. So when you move the mouse, sometimes there's a little delay. So there's a little and it shows you the delay between where you moved it to and where it got to remotely, which is it's subtle little things. You actually don't think about them. It just demonstrates that your mouse didn't quite get over there yet. It's usually the latency isn't usually that bad, but it can be a little bit. Just demonstrates what's going on. So.
And that's I mean, like you said, it's little things, but those are huge. People learn to kind of work around some of these impairments, that are attributed to latency or whatever else. But having the tool be smart enough to help you out with that, to detect these things and kind of give you an in, that kind of spills over into this next item, actually, this interactive troubleshooting. There is some intelligence that is getting built in to using this system, and particularly in meetings. And that's, this interactive troubleshooting, we're talking about things here like the system detecting that you are speaking, but you're on mute, and letting you know that you're on mute so that you can fix that, before you run into the classic thing that I do at least once or twice a day, and that's give some big long speech realizing I was on mute at the end of it. So
like I did before we got on here.
We had a little bit of that in our preparation. So I mean, the system is great for that. Simultaneous ringing, a big deal for a lot of people. So that was able to come as well. So you can have more than one phone be ring when you're getting a call in Teams. Speed dial, one of the first capabilities that came into calling for Teams, but the ability to keep certain users on a speed dial of sorts within your call tab there. Suggested contacts, right? So Teams detecting who you're talking to often, who is a relevant and pertinent person for you to probably want to add to your contact list, and make a suggestion for you within your contacts tab there. Voicemail. So this is kind of one of those, everyone always jokes about voicemail, right? But it's still used. The fact of the matter is it still gets used fairly often, and even when it's not used, it's always asked for. So that was one of the, in order for people to really start legitimately moving over to Teams as their client for calls from Skype for Business within phone system, voicemail was one of those capabilities that I think they had to have out the gate. So that's present.
Yep.
Let's see. Oh, yes, and importantly, the transcription and playback options, those being built right into the system there are handy. Of course, we had playback options within the Skype for Business client, but the transcription is pretty cool especially when it's accurate, right? So,
and it's the way it works, the way it's visually presented is pretty nice. In Skype for Business, you go over to Outlook to see the transcription. If I'm remembering correct, I guess I'm not tangling that up, but here, right in line when you see you have a voicemail, you can immediately identify if that was indeed just a marketing call that you can ignore. So it's right in line with the voicemail. I think that's a nice visual touch.
It is. I really enjoy the way the whole calling structure looks like personally within Teams. But voicemail is one of those areas where I think they've tied everything together in one place really, really cleanly and nicely.
And if I may also say negative things, we're saying a lot of positive things. One of the things I might, on the contact speed dial page, it just seems like the button, the speed dials are just pretty big. So, for example, on my screen, the size I have it, I can get 1, 2, 3, 4 times 3. What's that? 12. Maybe they could be a little smaller, but that's a personal preference.
Yeah, and I see what you mean there too. It's they've tried to. There's I think an attempt to kind of build this whole minimal UI structure that has kind of become popular in developing today and designing UIs I think that they're trying to make less in one space with bigger cleaner buttons. I personally would like to cram a little more in there too.
A good point is if you're on a tablet, this looks like you would expect. On a PC, it might be a little. So there's kind of this different experience you might want. So on a tablet, totally get it. If you're on a Surface, this would be a great, kind of touchy feeling. Some feedback that I'd
and
have.
that's a good point. Developing for a touch first world is a different game there as well. So, translating user input to standard format phone numbers. So enable the automatic data normalization of user data entry. Call quality diagnostic portal. That's the obviously the portal where we can take a look at the quality of any given call, Teams data in there as well. TTY support. And some of these I'm going to glaze over, so if you want to interject and say anything about any one of them, feel free to jump in.
Yep.
I don't want to. Some of them are just a little more straightforward. So. Client support. So client support now for Windows, Mac, Edge, iOS, and Android. From the very beginning, I felt that Teams has done an incredible job with being present on almost every platform with almost all the features. So they have strengthened that position as well.
In a more unified way than Skype for Business had been. So, for example,
much more.
Yeah, so for the PC client is it's really one animal, and the Mac client is really another animal by another team.
Yeah.
So whereas when you go to Microsoft Teams, that experience is much more similar. I mean, it's much more unified. So I think that's a good motion as well.
Yeah. Okay, Skype for Business to Teams calling. So, calling back and forth between the two clients. Obviously, as organizations consider adopting Teams as their main calling tool of choice when it comes to phone system, a lot of them are not going to just say, sure, let's do a solid cutover directly from everyone in Skype for Business to everyone in Teams. You're probably going to have a period where you've got people on both systems. Interop between the two is a critical piece of maintaining good operational flow of calls from day to day. So that's good that they got that one out there at first as well. Audio conferencing in over 90 countries. So pretty much audio conferencing went into preview before Ignite even. And it was kind of formally announced after that, and they've now brought that fully into Teams. It's been in a lot of countries to start with. So as we'll see with a lot of the capabilities of phone system within Skype for Business, as they appear in Teams, they're pretty much just going to shift over to Teams with all the same settings and features and policies that are already in place.
Yes.
So audio conferencing shifted over.
So that is something we talked about at Ignite, that you do your work getting everything configured in phone system was Cloud PBX. And those pipes will just be turned over and plumbed right into Teams. And what we saw with conferencing, from my understanding, I didn't dig into it super in depth, but my understanding is really all the work you had done, that now works in Microsoft Teams. So you're starting to see that idea that if you have auto attendance, obviously we don't have that quite yet in Teams, but if you get those things all configured up, once they're working in Teams, your work isn't lost. The plumbing just comes over to Teams and you're up and ready to go. So good to see that motion.
Right. You're not recreating anything that you've already created to make it work in Teams as well as Skype for Business. They both will be housed under one portal with one set of controls for each. So mute other participants. That's a welcome addition for people that are managing meetings, particularly larger meetings.
Absolutely. Very, very welcome.
Contact groups. So one of the Skype for Business messaging capabilities coming to Teams provides support for contact groups originally created in Skype for Business. So when you're looking at your contacts, the way you've got them grouped in Skype for Business, that will be brought over to Teams. This is listed as one of the items that was delivered, but I don't know that I've actually. Maybe I just haven't looked for it yet. It might be there, and I just haven't looked, but.
So this was one that I would. It's going to evolve, I believe. So, for example, you have a kind of, at the moment, there's kind of a kind of segmented contact list experience. So you're probably imagining that those contacts would be over in phone or in the call tab. I imagine you're probably expecting them to be there. So kind of like maybe under calls, contacts, and where the speed dialers are somewhere thereabouts. But interesting.
And in this one, it's calling out messaging capabilities, right?
Yeah.
So this is talking about the chat.
Yeah. So that's where it should be. I don't know if you can see it, but if I'm understanding correctly, and I'm not seeing something that didn't get released yet, it's under chats, recent contacts.
Okay. So
and that's where it should be showing up.
Okay, and I just haven't purposely looked for it, so I need to go do that afterwards. But okay,
that's fine. But there is, in some ways, I think some people are gonna, you're kind of thinking those contacts, won't they show up under calls? It's a little bit like you have chats and you have calls, and I think there's maybe on the Microsoft side, there's kind of this idea that chats might be a little different than calls, but we've kind of gotten used to the fact that you have a contact list, whether you're in chats or calls, and now that's segmenting a bit. I'm not sure what the final way it'll look will be, but this is how it is for now.
I think you're right. I think it will be an evolving experience, but we've started making steps towards getting those contacts ported over, so that's a big deal. Messaging policies, one of those IT Pro capabilities, the ability to set user-level policies to control your messaging experiences. Unified presence between Skype for Business and Teams. That was one of those early asks and very popular asks out on user voice to get those presence synced between the two. I think that there's still I think there's at times a lag there. I think that's probably going to be something that's perfected over time. It's good to see that they've marked that item as having been addressed and taken care of, but I think that there are lags that are being reported, and people are seeing some discrepancies there between those. So hopefully that'll tighten up as we move forward as well.
Yeah, as far as lags go, I think there's my experience has been even changing your own presence.
Yes.
So it takes, so if I go in and I say I'm going to change it to do not disturb, well, it did it right away. Sometimes even changing your own, it actually did it nice and snappy for me as I tested it here. But sometimes I've noticed, so now I went from do not disturb to away, and now I'm waiting.
Agile development. They've fixed it on the fly.
Yeah. So there's even a little delay in changing your own, so I can see how that might filter the whole way through, especially through some kind of interop.
Right, exactly. When we're talking two systems on the back end that have to be, exactly.
So my away went now. But I know, talking about a feature where, the very first time I heard about this at MVP Summit, the past MVP Summit, the first thing I was thinking, wait a minute, don't tell me this is 2 presences and 2 IMs, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
The interop is coming. It
is, and it's being constantly worked on, and the product group is well aware that that's a big issue for people. So,
yep.
Teams interop policies, another IT Pro capability that allows you to kind of control, at a user or wider level, if people are using Teams as their phone system yet, or if they're using Skype for Business still, or how that works. We saw what that's going to look like in a graphical user interface at Ignite, how they'll be able to control that within the portal. But for now, we have those capabilities within PowerShell.
Mm-hmm.
Blind transferring has come, so allows a call to be sent to another extension immediately. Call blocking, good to have that in place. Call forwarding, that's one of those main key pieces of call control functionality you need to have, right? Call forwarding and transferring and all that good stuff. Caller ID masking, also a big ask and an important one for a lot of organizations. E911 support, and I think it's always important to make the distinguishing comment there that E911 within Office 365 is static still. We're not talking dynamic at this point, but the support for E911 is there. Extension dialing. So a feature that adds extension dialing to Teams. Now, this was really bringing calling over into Teams, phone system into Teams. You already had the ability to do custom tenant dial plans for phone system. So again, bringing calling into Teams, that those dialing rules and all that are still there. They still apply to the user who was brought over. So if you're using extensions, there you go. Hold, really nothing is needed there. It's hold. You can do hold in Teams. Cool. Multi-call handling. So obviously this is kind of a big deal if you expect to receiving more than one call at the same time and want to be able to appropriately handle that. Good to see that there. And then finally enable,
Absolutely necessary for high volume kind of scenarios, attendant console scenarios, for example, or other users that really take a lot of calls. Gotta be able to, and up until now, it was one call. So if another one came, you had to hang up the one and get the other. So that's just a basic good thing to see.
And you guys know a little something about that at Landis Computers, right? You there?
And I missed your audio there.
Oh, I said, and you guys know a little something about multi-call handling over at in your neck of the woods, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. As soon as it was available, we're all over it. So yeah.
Awesome. Enable existing calling plan support. So we've kind of really touched on that. Pretty much, it was already there for phone system and Skype for Business. Now you've got it in Teams if you've moved calling over. So
reinforcing once again exactly what we said at Ignite. You know, that thing that this is, it's turning it on in Teams. What you've already configured, turning it on in Teams.
The transition is far less painful than one might think in terms of moving, quote unquote, moving systems. So
yeah.
I'm going to, instead of going over each of these items and each of these check marks right now, I love the visual that Tom put here, but I would encourage each of you to check out his blog from the link that I'll put in the YouTube video description. He puts a really good visual of those roadmap slides that Microsoft provided last quarter, and he puts handy little check marks right next to all the features that they delivered for calling, meetings, and messaging. Now, he does call out at the end here a few delayed features, because not all of these got check marks that we're aiming for Q4. So what do we have that got delayed? Enabling call quality analytics. So that's not quite there yet. They're still working on that.
It was not there, as I understand, it was not there when Tom made the article. It is now has been released, I think, yesterday or the other day. So that one is now there. Another one that is also obviously the give and take control seems to be there, at least for some tenants.
Okay. So going from calling within Teams, and Tom, thank you very much for putting this blog post together. Great breakdown of it all. Moving on from that, let's jump over to a little blog post that you may be familiar with here, the Attendant Pro Blog. We have a post from January 11th that I would love for you to elaborate on a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, well, Landis Technologies is announcing that we will be releasing Microsoft Office 365 Contact Center. So we are doing this because we've been getting requests. Obviously, we already have thousands of attendant consoles, and many of those are being used in essentially contact center-like ways. So one way to think of it is that we already have thousands of contact center, in quotation marks, seats out there. And we're getting asked, we would like this functionality, we would like wall boards, we would like this. And we made the decision, obviously we've been developing this for some time already behind the scenes, to bring out an Office 365 Contact Center by Landis Technologies. So,
and the thing I want to call out in this first paragraph here on this really quick is this is, it says Office 365, doesn't say Skype for Business or Teams here, but this will be tailored for, as the text here says, Skype for Business and Teams, correct?
Yes, we have Office 365 in our sites, but it will work with Skype for Business Server as well. So awesome. Yes, it's working with either one.
So just as quickly as people are making the decision to start moving into Teams, there are contact center options now that are on the table for you moving in.
Yeah.
Let's scroll down a little bit on this post here and touch on a few of these key items. We'll start with some of these up in bold here, a few of these design principles. I think the first one here is a very impressive sentence, and I'd like you to kind of explain a little bit more on that. But 1 minute setup involving no servers. That sentence could be quite appealing to a great many people looking for contact center functionality. Do you care to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I know. It almost sounds impossible. But one of the things we have focused on very, very dramatically, because obviously one of the barriers to getting into a contact center is the traditionally long cycle to get the whole thing going. You're spinning up multiple servers. Sometimes even if you're not looking for redundancy, you have to have multiple SQL servers and communication servers to get that whole thing running. And we really focused on making this thing working 1 minute setup, 1 minute simple and fast setup. I almost said 5 minutes because I'm afraid people won't believe it, but I sat with our engineers and our developers and had them demonstrate installing and rolling out a new tenant of contact center in literally about 40 seconds. So you install a
Wow.
small client, you say what you want the name to be and what your administrator password is, and you're going. Which means,
That's awesome.
yeah, and we're obviously using an Azure backend, Azure Web Service backend that we're spinning up for you in our Landis Technologies super simple way. So this does not have to be Josh Blaylock type technical expertise. A manager can walk up to this and get it going. It's not, you're not spending hours, you're literally minutes, if not 1 minute, in the 5-10 minute kind of time frame.
Yeah. That's a big deal right there. So leading with that point is incredible. Familiar is another important point. Excuse me.
Yeah.
The fact that it visually integrates with the rest of your Office 365 suite. I'm going to scroll back up a little bit here. I take a look. Is this graphic we're looking at here? This is kind of what we would expect the end result to look like as far as one of these wall boards?
Yes. So after 1 minute install, you can start making phone calls to the agent that you installed, and you'll see this kind of a wall board. So this is not magic and waving wands. That is what the UI looks like. And you'll notice that it looks just like Office 365.
Yeah,
this is obviously
got a little waffle menu up top up here, and that's slick.
Yeah, it looks visually, you're going to think you're in Office 365. And this is the manager portal, obviously, where the wallboard would be launched from. But also the agent side. People are familiar with Attendant Pro and how we really imitate, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Skype for Business, that exact same experience of really familiar. Just looks like Skype for Business and Teams and the Microsoft Office 365 interface.
That's
so
awesome.
You don't have to learn. You don't have to learn another interface. You've already learned how Office 365 works. You've already learned how Skype for Business and Teams work. We want users just to be able to go to work.
Yeah, that's a big deal when people are evaluating solutions. Is what is our learning curve going to be like on this? Is it yet another tool that our end users have to get familiar with? And if they're already familiar, with your Attendant Pro product, and then on top of that, Office 365. It's a pretty natural flow for them. So that's cool.
And so often you get into a contact center and it's made by a different vendor that, buttons aren't where you expected, and they, things are, they're focusing on the nuts and bolts of the the communication cues and things, and they're not worrying about what that user experience. Typically, call centers, even ones that work with Skype for Business, really look like you're working in a different world, and we want to bring that together in a unified experience.
Now, sentiment, cognitive services, enabling live sentiment feedback and reporting. Are you able to provide like a brief description of what exactly that's talking about? Because I think that's fairly new to a lot of people.
Exactly. So once again, you with most call centers, what you have is you can do analytics on speed, right? You can do speed analytics, but very few can you actually. So is speed the only dynamic in a call that you want to measure? For example, how happy people are, or how pleasant they are, or how good things are going on the call is perhaps as important as how fast you hang up on them, right?
Right.
So we're bringing that in as a integral part of this whole thing. So you can do. Obviously, wallboards are often measuring how fast you're handling calls. But what if the wallboard and the manager portal can also let the managers know how good the sentiment is in those calls, and that's what we're doing. We're bringing it in. We're bringing it in live, actually. So as the agent is talking, it's measuring. What they said was there good sentiment there, or could they have said that in a better way? One of the things I find really interesting. So if you say the phrase, "I have no idea," that's very negative. but there's positive ways to say that. And with sentiment tracking and coaching, a manager doesn't necessarily need to sit and hover there. The system itself can kind of coach. So the way it works currently, the agent on the local agent that they see, it gives color coding. Red being bad, yellow being neutral, green being good. Things are going good. And so the agent is getting instantaneous feedback on how they're doing. And once again, that's available in that 1 minute or let's say 5-minute implementation. That's already going. It's not like you have to go in and do a lot more configuration. No, the sentiment just gets going using Microsoft Cognitive Services.
I think that's going to be a very interesting, that's a fairly new measure there of call, and that'll be interesting to watch how that develops, how the cognitive services portion of that develops. Aside from being based on words, it'll be interesting to see if it begins to pick up tone eventually, if the services evolve to that level. But very cool to see that work its way in at this stage. Gamified and fun experience, the last bolded item there. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so almost every platform you use, from LinkedIn to Facebook, any modern social platform, even Twitter, the interface is not this, heavy enterprise kind of experience. It's gamified. It nudges you in the right direction. For example, in Twitter, when you click on a like, you get this little feedback that gives you a nice little, I don't know what it is, a little explosion on the heart. But just those nuanced things that nudge you to do the things that you ought to do. And obviously another thing with gamification is, points and how, leaderboards, and how am I doing in comparison to other users? And now, because we have sentiment, it's not necessarily the fastest guy that wins. It can be the person that is speedy and pleasant. So
right.
I think, I don't think that this has to be something that's siloed off and gets separated from all that good, fun, and coaching and nudging in the right direction kind of characteristics in a contact center. So we want to make it a gamified. So you have these little elements that are nudging you. I don't know if you've been at the Skype for Business conference. Sorry, I'm aging myself there. But Ignite, where they used to have a leaderboard, and that really incentivizes people to do the things that they ought to do. Who's doing the best. So being able to compare yourself, I think it'll make, not only is it fun and it's incentivized, but it helps people do the things that they ought to do.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. That's a visual measurement is quite a motivator in a group of people. So, but doing that as well, that's awesome. All right, so let's move past these 5 main items here. Let's quickly just go down this list. We've got a number of features that you said in the post here are going to be available at initial release or shortly thereafter. We've got those definable wall boards. So it's not, the ability to define the wall boards is important, and that's good. Live manager dashboard showing your live calls. Manager barge in and listen. I love the term there, barge in and listen. I think, you can kind of get an idea of what's going on there by that full description, but can you talk a bit about barging in? I just think it's funny that to have barge in be a feature. That's cool. So,
for example, let's say that there's a manager, he's watching his live calls, all his agents. He has 10 agents, they're all on a phone call, and he is watching, and literally in our manager live calls view, you can see the sentiment of each one of those calls live as the call is going. So, for example, let's say he's watching and he sees one, the sentiment is red for an extended period of time. He can click on that call and join in on the call and help out with the call.
So that's awesome. Yeah. Especially if you've got like maybe a new agent or someone who's just learning the ropes and they're starting to flounder and feel unsure of themselves. Having somebody be able to swoop in and help them along that's incredible. That's good.
Yep.
All right. Call recording and Azure Web Portal to listen to recordings. Again, the sentiment and speed performance reporting. Some more modern reporting. live sentiment agent coaching, that gamified experience that we just talked about. Dynamics 365 and CRM deep integration. And that's really important when it comes to controlling that relationship with your customers.
And once again, we're not talking about a 5-day engagement to get this integrated. It's really, you set some things and it's working, and you can have, as the phone is ringing, you can see that customer and get an overview of what's happening with them in CRM. So once again, that 1 minute simple, fast setup.
That's very, very important in managing customer relationships, especially as you move from issue to issue and interaction to interaction. It's good to track how they're feeling. So wrap up information tracking. Call queues from our phone system, call queues. It's a big one, especially as it makes its way into Teams. And then incoming and outgoing contact center features. And lastly, before our more item there, we've got skills-based routing, which do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that may not be in the very first release. We already have the code written. But what that would be is, for example, so a scenario where a call is coming in and you can look at the phone number and say, you know what, this needs a German speaker. And so it routes it over to a German speaker. That's the kind of, when we say skills-based, that's what we're talking about at the moment. And that, once again, that will evolve. A lot of this we are depending on very code we have written. Obviously, there are not Office 365 server-based APIs at the moment. So things like barge-in, call recording, those are things that we are using technologies that we have developed apart from Microsoft. So, and I forget even where I was going with that, but those are things as things happen. So when Microsoft brings server APIs, we will obviously jump on that as well if there's anything that we're not currently doing that we need to. So
and that's there's a lot of people kind of sitting on the sidelines watching and waiting for those APIs to show their faces. So but you guys clearly have done a lot of work outside of them in the meantime. I am going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen now that we've made our way through all of the different tabs there.
Maybe one last thing I'll say, if you want to we're going to have a webinar in the coming weeks, I'm saying, and if you want to be a part of that, landistechnologies.com/Office 365 contact center, and you can sign up to get notified when that webinar happens and be a part of it. So.
And I will include that link in the YouTube video description. Great. So that if you want to go and find that, you can go directly to the link and take part. I, for one, am very excited to see this demo, to see it happen. But I appreciate you making the time to come on today, not just to co-host with me and talk about what's new and go over the topics, but to share what's coming from Landis. That is pretty cool, and I know there's a lot of excitement built around that. So thank you for coming on today, Matt. Always a pleasure.
Yes, absolutely. Me as well.
All right. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We are clearly going a little longer than we typically have, but again, we're looking to kind of change things up here in 2018. The recaps may not follow a very good normal pattern this year as I kind of figure out how we're redefining the way we do things. But I enjoyed this format, and I'd love to hear your feedback. If you like seeing other people from the community, other leaders and thought leaders in the community, product owners, if you like seeing them come in and co-host and talk about what they're doing, let me know your thoughts. Share your feedback, and we will see you guys all here. I'm not going to say next week because I'm not sure how that's going to go down at this stage, but we'll see you back here soon with another Teams recap. Thank you, and adios.